Alright, guys, we got some Vanguard news to talk about here. Since a few days ago, kind of out of the blue actually, we got the announcement of Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days 2. So, a brand new Vanguard video game is coming out, which I think was kind of expected by a lot of people, especially after the rule changes with Divines, implementing all that into Dear Days 1 would have been a task. So, as soon as that was announced, you kind of expected the new game to be coming down the pipeline eventually. But they have released a trailer for this game as well as putting up the official site, so I'll have links to all that in the description if you want to check any of that out. But we do have a decent amount of information about this game so far. So we know that it is coming out for Nintendo Switch and Steam, so same platforms as Dear Days 1 was on. It also has a confirmed release date of January 30th, 2025, so early next year. And of course, the big feature of this game is it does have the new rule changes for Divines. So the 50 card main deck, the energy mechanic, all that sort of stuff. All that is implemented into the game. We're also going to be playing as Yuki again, so we'll be continuing her story, the same main character from Dear Days 1. They also showed a handful of new characters, which the one they put a lot of focus on was this girl named Otowa Dosaki. So she seems to be an important character to the story this time as well. I'm sure she'll end up being playable too. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room right off the bat, because one thing we did find out about this game is that the MSRP is, once again, $70 but fucking dollars. So, just like Dear Days 1, this game is completely overpriced. And they have confirmed that there is going to be DLC for it as well. So, I fully expect a $70 card pass to be coming down the pipeline at some point again, too. So, this is bullshit, just like it was bullshit for Dear Days 1. I went on this rant already back when that game came out, and all those points still stand here. Now, of course, this is just an international pricing issue. The MSRP for Japan is 7,678 yen, which translates to about $52 or thereabouts in US dollars. So it's reasonably priced in Japan, but other countries aren't as lucky. So, of course, everyone is complaining about the price right off the bat again, as they should be, because it is complete horseshit. There's no justifiable reason for this game to cost anywhere near this much. It's a fucking card game simulator, for Christ's sake. Like, it's not some huge, massive budget AAA game. It's a niche title. So, people should be complaining about this price. It is absurd. I did notice that the comment section for that trailer has been turned off. Now, I don't know if it was turned off to begin with, or if it was turned off because people were complaining about the price in every comment. It was off as soon as I saw it, so, if somebody else knows, then they can confirm in the comments or whatever. But if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably because people were complaining about the price. I know if you go to the tweet on their official English accounts, all the replies to the reveal tweet for this were all complaining about the price as well. So, it's been a pretty consistent response from the fan base of this price is horseshit. Now, I have seen some people making an argument that I do want to address here because, frankly, I think it's a shitty one. And it's that I've seen some people say that, despite this game's overinflated price, that it's still a lot cheaper than investing into the physical card game, which technically is true, but I think it's a bad argument, because it's really an apples and oranges comparison. Buying into the physical card game versus buying a video game simulator of the card game is totally not the same thing. By that logic, if the next Gran Turismo game that come out was priced $1,000, then you could still justify it by saying, oh, well, that's cheaper than buying a real-life fucking Lamborghini or whatever. But that's clearly not the same thing. So, I don't like that argument. I think it's horseshit. Investing, into physical decks that you actually own and can play with or resell or what have you is definitely an apples and oranges comparison to just buying a fucking video game. Which the other thing I've been seeing people say that is actually kind of pissing me off, to be honest with you, is I've actually seen people advocating for a fucking free-to-play game instead. Which, if you're one of the people asking for that, you fucking crazy. I don't know what else to tell you. Which, I consider free-to-play games to be self-harm, as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's no reason to put yourself through that horse shit. And, the prices for this game are outrageous. I understand that. They shouldn't be $70. The DLC shouldn't be as expensive as it is. I get that. But that doesn't justify wanting a free-to-play thing instead. Free-to-play is definitely worse in every fucking way. The last thing in the world that I would want to see is a free-to-play, online-only, mobile, microtransaction-riddled horseshit Vanguard game. Because, we've seen that with Yu-Gi-Oh! They come out with Master Duel, and it's been very successful for them. They made a lot of money off of it. But ultimately, it's a worse product. It also results in, us getting standalone games that I would actually like to have. It results in those basically disappearing. I would love to see another, Link Evolution style Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, but we haven't got that, and we most likely won't be getting that anytime soon, because everyone's just funneling into Master Duel instead, and it's printing money hand over fist. So it destroys any chances of us getting any kind of actual good game out of it. And when a game like that eventually fails, you're going to end up with exactly what Vanguard Zero players have right now, which is butt-fuck nothing. So that would be the last thing in the world I want to see, would be any kind of free-to-play Vanguard anything. I definitely prefer this model of a standalone, mostly single-player focused game. Having the online option is great, but having a standalone game like this that you can do expansions for, you can add more cards to if you want, or just release a new game with updated sets in a few years. I think that's a much better model. If they could just get the pricing under control, it would basically be perfect. I think the peak Yu-Gi-Oh! Was like the back, in the DS era when we got the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship games. Those were great. And Deer Days is about as close as we come to that as far as Vanguard goes. So even with the outrageous prices, I think it's still a better alternative to any sort of free-to-play mobile shit going on. Now, with that being said, I do understand people being upset about the price. I'm upset about it too. But there are ways around it. There are ways with Deer Days 1 if you got a little bit creative. And I think most of those ways are still going to apply this time for Deer Days 2 as well. I know a lot of people with the first game got an alternate account and purchased it off the Colombian eShop, since their regional equivalents worked out to be the cheapest one that anyone found, I think. So you could do that and, region hop with your eShop account and get it from another region where it would be cheaper. Now, me personally, with the first game, I actually imported a Japanese physical copy through PlayAsia, and it was $56, and I bought something else with it to get free shipping. So I wound up getting it about $14 cheaper than it would have been if I bought it digitally over here, which is ridiculous to even say that, importing a physical title from the other side of the planet is cheaper than buying it digitally locally. But that's how it worked out. So I got that game for cheaper using that method. Now, there is going to be a physical release for this game as well. And again, the Japanese release will include 3 promo cards, just like Deer Days 1 did. Now, the initial reveal tweet on the English account did mention something about Switch physical pre-orders opening on September 2nd, which is today as of my recording this, which implied to me that we might actually be getting an English physical release, with like an ESRB rating in the corner and everything. But I've looked around today and I don't see any pre-orders up for it anywhere. I checked on Amazon, I checked on Best Buy, I checked on the Bushy Road Global online store thing, and none of those places had it. So I don't know if it's going to go up later or there is no English physical release. I know the Japanese version is up for pre-order on AmiAmi and I think a few other places. Last time I checked, PlayAsia still doesn't have it listed yet, but I'm sure they will at some point. So the Japanese physical release is at least confirmed. It's still kind of up in the air on the English one. I don't really know what's going on there. If I find out later, I'll try to put a comment and pin it or something. But importing physically might again still end up being a cheaper option than buying it digitally, which, as retarded as that sounds, it could be a reality yet again, like it was the first time. And as far as the DLC goes, too, again, we don't know what the DLC pricing for Deer Days 2 is going to be. I expect it to not be good, based on the track record. But with the first game, I used a combination of those My Nintendo Gold points, as well as some Black Friday eShop card sales, in order to get the DLC for this game as low as I possibly could. Which it still was a little bit more than I would have liked to give in for it, but it definitely was a lot better than paying the retail price. So there are methods to end up getting this game for cheaper if you don't want to pay the full $70 price. I know I'm definitely not going to be spending that on this game. So if you get creative, you can find a way to save a few bucks and still be able to get it without having to deal with their horse shit. When speaking of saving a few bucks, when they announced this game, they actually did put Deer Days 1 and all of its DLC on the first significant sale it's ever had. It's actually currently 30% off on the eShop and on Steam as well, I believe. Which, I say the first significant sale because the base game for Deer Days 1 has gone on sale a few times, but each time it was only a 10% off sale. And since it was so overpriced to begin with, 10% off only brought it down to like $63, which is still higher than your average Switch game, and more than I gave for it when I imported the fucking thing. So 30% off is actually a significant sale. It does get it down to basically close to what it should have been to begin with. And also, this is the first time that any of the DLC has been on sale ever. So this is the best opportunity you've had to get it if you do want to get it, through the US store without jumping through a bunch of hoops or anything. Now, as for me personally, I obviously already own the first card pass. I did buy the second card pass. When was it? July, I think? June, July, something like that. A few weeks ago. So I've already bought that. The only thing that I don't own yet for this game is a few of the character sets and the additional special set. That last one they come out, that was like a set and a third. So I will be picking those up probably at some point before the sale goes off, since this is probably the best opportunity to do so. But if you haven't invested into Deer Days yet, you're probably better off just waiting for Deer Days 2, unless you're putting a lot of importance on the story content of the first game. As far as the actual card content goes, we do already know the card pool for Deer Days 2, and it is going to include everything from Deer Days 1, including DLC, plus even more on top of that. So if you're just wanting a Vanguard game to play and you're not putting a lot of emphasis on the story content, then waiting for this second game is probably the best way to go, and the most efficient money-wise as well. So price stuff aside, let's actually get into what we do know about this game, which I did just mention the card pool. They have confirmed that this game is going to have over 3,000 cards. So that's about triple of what Deer Days had at launch before all the DLC. So they confirmed that it is going to include all of the sets from D-Series, from D-Booster Set 1 all the way up through DZ Lyrical Booster 1. So that means it includes everything that was in the Deer Days base game, everything that was in the Deer Days DLC, and then about 9 2/3 sets on top of that. We'll get the rest of D-Booster Set 11, which the additional special set only had a portion of. We'll get D booster sets 12, 13, and Lyrical 4. And then the first 3 main DZ booster sets, as well as the DZ Lyrical booster with the like Star Festival boss units and the dress-up forms for the Lyrical Booster 3 bosses. We'll also be getting all the smaller side stuff like the Triple Drive booster, the Festival Booster 2024, the Luard and Shiranui Stride deck sets, the DZ start decks, all that sort of stuff. So, a pretty good chunk of cards in the English format, at least. I think DZ Lyrical Booster 1 comes out the end of this month, if I remember right. So, this game's coming out in January, so it would be about 4 months behind or so as far as English format goes. So, not too bad. This also pretty much puts the final nail in the coffin of hoping for any more additions to Dear Days 1. Which, again, money-wise, if they did do, like I suggested they might do back in my last Dear Days video I made talking about the additional special set, if they did do one last card pass to finish out the Will Dress era stuff, they probably would have charged $70 for that. So if you're going to spend another $70, you might as well just spend it on a new game and get, an entire another batch of story content, all the cards we would have gotten in that update and even more on top of it. So, this is probably the more efficient way to go about it in terms of costs and in terms of just how much you're getting. So, beyond that, a few other things that I've noticed just from perusing the site. Unfortunately, they did confirm that there still isn't going to be any crossplay between the Switch and Steam versions of the game, which again was a problem inherited from Dear Days, kind of like the pricing issue. So, that does suck. I really wish they could have got that worked out. Which, at least for Dear Days 1, the Switch version seems to be a lot more populated than the Steam version. Mostly from Japanese players, I think. But that is confirmed not to be happening for this game as well, unfortunately. Another thing I noticed was that it looks like they're going to add deck boxes to this game as another little customization option for your deck on top of your sleeves and your playmat. So that's a cool little addition too. I kind of like that. We did get a brief look at the UI as well. We saw some screenshots of Cardfight going on, and it does look very similar to Dear Days 1. There are some reused assets and stuff. One thing that did jump out at me was that the columns were spaced out a little bit more, which I think is probably just to accommodate Bavsagra and I guess Silhouette as well. Since in Dear Days 1, whenever you arm Bavsagra, your columns actually move in order for you to have space to put 3 cards on your Vanguard circle. So it looks like we won't have to have that this time. They actually planned ahead and made a little space for more cards. Another really minor thing that jumped out at me was that I noticed that on the trigger check animation, when you check a trigger, the little trigger icon that pops up actually has the D-Series style black base, unlike Dear Days 1 that reused the asset from Vanguard EX and had the V-Series style trigger icons with a silver base. So that's a very minor thing that doesn't really matter, but I noticed that. That was one of the first things that jumped out at me actually when I saw that screenshot. So that's pretty much everything that's confirmed that we know about this game so far. Now, as far as some of the things that I'd like to see and some of the things I'm hoping for in this game, first and foremost, the first thing that jumped to my mind was I hope we get a lot more deck slots this time around. Dear Days 1 had 80 deck slots altogether, which I'm hoping for at least double this time because we're getting a lot of new decks. And if you play like I do and like building damn near every deck in the game, and sometimes multiple variants of the same deck, you're going to need a lot of slots for all that, especially with DZ introducing so many new ride lines. So I hope they at least double the number of decks. I'd make it as big as possible, make it like 200 or something, just so we have plenty of space to make all kinds of different decks that we want to make. So that's definitely near the top of my list as far as hopes go. Another thing that I hope they put more attention to this time is making a better translation. Dear Days 1 definitely had some parts that had a wonky translation or sounded machine translated in parts, especially early on, like during the tutorial sections or in the demo. It wasn't as bad throughout the rest of the game, and it was never so bad that like you couldn't understand what was going on or anything. But there were definitely some spots where stuff sounded wonky or just had some typos, or there was a few parts where it had like some lines that actually came off pretty funny. So hopefully they put more attention into that, get things like that fixed. Fix all the typos and stuff and some of the card text. I know there was a few cases like with the grade 3 Hazaret, where in the game she was never updated to have her errata that the physical English card got. So that was still outdated. And then there was, of course, the instance like with Impalza, where the card says Flower of Ruined Castle for her name, like it's supposed to be, but the card data section actually said Blossom of Ruined Castle. And, that sticks out as something that really should have been caught and corrected, either before it released or at least very quickly in a patch. And neither of those things ever happened. So hopefully they do a little bit better of a polished job this time on some of their translations and their typos and such. Another big thing I like to see is a lot more story and single player focused content. I like the story in Dear Days 1, and obviously it's continuing here, and that's great, but it was kind of short. I know you had the, kind of extra sections of the story where you could play as Yuki's brother, and then you could play as some of the characters from the anime and such. But I hope they expand on the amount of story content quite a bit in this game. Give us more stuff to do after you beat the story. Maybe having like local shop tournaments or side quests where you can like unlock different sleeves or deck boxes or what have you. Again, I brought it up before. Those World Championship Yu-Gi-Oh games on the DS were absolutely fantastic. And they had all kinds of side activities that you could do. The 5Ds ones actually had like a little racing mini game where you could race on the dual runners. So there's all sorts of things they could implement into a Vanguard game to kind of expand on that single player aspect. It would be cool if we had like sort of like a puzzle challenge mode. Some of those World Championship games had that in Yu-Gi-Oh as well, where they gave you a scenario and you had to like win in one turn, or you had to do some specific combo to do something in a certain amount of turns, and you had to figure out the proper way to combo your cards in order to pull that off. So it'd be cool to see something like that in a game like this as well. Which, if we are going to get extremely overpriced DLC again, then maybe include some more story content with that DLC, which would be a great way to introduce more characters to the game, so that could give us more opponents in the CPU fight mode. That could give a good opportunity to update some of the characters' decks with new cards from the DLC, which is something that Dear Days 1 did not do, and it definitely became more and more of a problem, especially, as we got more and more cards added to the game. Your decks very quickly outclassed the decks of the CPU opponents, since yours were getting new support and theirs weren't. So that would be a good way to do that. That is another thing I'd very much like to see, more optimized decks for the CPU opponents, and decks that update as more cards get added to the game with DLC. Even if you have to add it as like a separate option, in Dear Days 1 you select the difficulty of the opponents and that determines their deck list. So if they have to add like a ultra hard difficulty or something, where they have a version of the deck that includes the updated support from the DLC, that would still be a good way to do it, I think. Just any way to make the CPU opponents more of a challenge for someone who has bought the DLC and has fully optimized decks of their own. It would be nice to be able to get more of a challenge out of the single player aspect without having to resort to online fights against actual people. Which, another thing I'd really like to see is something that I think we actually probably have a pretty good chance of seeing this. I'd like there to be some sort of reward for people who have a save file from Dear Days 1. even if it's as simple as just being able to transfer over your card collection or your in-game currency or whatever, just to save you time. Throw a bone to all those people who have spent the ridiculous amount of money that your first game costs, since, again, for someone who hasn't bought Deer Days 1, if you buy Deer Days 2, you're basically getting all the cards from that game plus more. So, give something to those people who supported you the first time around, and at least let them save a little time by not having to unlock all those cards in game again, and just being able to focus on collecting the new cards that were added in Deer Days 2. So, I think there's a decent chance of us getting something like that. I think some of the 3DS Vanguard games had a feature like that, where if you had a save file from one of the other ones, you could unlock something or transfer over something into one of the newer ones. I never played the 3DS games because they were Japanese only, but I'm pretty sure that they had some sort of feature like that. So I'd like to see that here, if it's some kind of, unlockable customization options, maybe some exclusive sleeves or exclusive deck box or something, or just being able to transfer, a portion of your progress or something. Hopefully we get something out of it for investing all that time and money into Deer Days 1. Now, the next thing I'd like to see probably isn't going to happen, unfortunately. I think it is a long shot. It didn't happen with Deer Days 1, and I doubt it will happen here. But I'm going to mention it anyway because I still would love to see the collaboration nations get added to the game. We've had quite a few of those in the physical card game, and it'll be really cool to be able to play those cards in Deer Days 2 as well. Especially for me personally, the Shaman King cards, because I'm a huge Shaman King fan. So I would love to see those in game. I know we've gotten a ton from different IPs. There's a bunch of Token Ranbu sets. There's the Monster Strike stuff, which was Japan exclusive, unfortunately. There's the crossovers with like Bang Dream and Mushi King and all these different things. Those VSPO VTuber ride lines that they come out with not too long ago. The quintessential quintuplets crossover stuff. There's all kinds of things they could add in. Now, this does involve licensing out those IPs in order to be able to add those to the game, which is, a higher cost, which is probably why none of that will ever happen. They should have plenty of money, considering how they're milking players over here. Take some of that money and pay for the fucking license, you assholes. But I don't expect to see any of that. Best case scenario, we might be able to get like the Bang Dream stuff or something like that, because that's something that's already owned by Bushiroad, so you wouldn't think it would be too difficult to get the rights to that. But yeah, I'm not expecting any of that to happen, but I would like to see it, even if it does end up being paid DLC or something. So then the last thing I wanted to mention here is something that is definitely a gigantic long shot. But the reason I bring this up is I did notice a little tidbit in one of the screenshots that they gave us on the official site, because we got to look at the deck builder screen in this game, and I noticed up near the top left, it did say standard, which I found interesting, because why would it need to say standard there if standard format is the only format in the game? So it crossed my mind, could it be possible that later down the line they actually end up adding in some of the past formats, and we maybe get V-Series and or premium formats added to the game as well? Now, I'm going to be honest, this is probably me huffing the biggest tank of hopium known to man, but you never know. Why else would it say standard there? So it could be totally meaningless. It probably is totally meaningless. I definitely don't expect them to add anything pre-D-Series to this game. It'd probably be a miracle for us to continuously, get the DZ sets going forward. So it's definitely a massive long shot, but if they did add in at least the V-Series stuff, I think that would be really awesome. They are already reusing some assets, going back to Vanguard EX, so it's not like they don't already have a base for a V-Series simulator sort of kind of built in already. So there's potential there, but I definitely wouldn't expect anything like that. That just jumped out at me when I saw that screenshot, and I thought I'd throw it out there into the world just because I felt like it. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that personally I would definitely like to see. I will be keeping an eye on this game going forward. I am pretty hyped for this, despite the whole price nonsense. I didn't pay full price for the first one, and I damn sure ain't gonna pay $70 for this one either. I will be picking it up at some point. I don't know if I'll get it at launch or not, because again, I'll have to jump through some hoops probably to get that price down to at least close to a reasonable range. So I don't know exactly when I'll be picking this up, but I do plan on getting it at some point because it's Vanguard and it's pretty much the best option for me since I don't really have any card shops near me that do Vanguard tournaments. So yeah, it is something I'm definitely looking forward to, despite having to get creative with ways to get it at an affordable price. But yeah, I guess that's all I got to say, so lots of luck to you and yours.